Hello everyone and welcome back to another Fury Warrior Mythic commentary video for Uldir Mythic. This time we're going to be looking at Vectis. This is where I go over the fight from a progression standpoint, going over my talent selection, how I approach the fight and kind of my thought process as I go through it. So let's go over the talents. So to begin with, going from top to bottom, I took Endless Rage, Double Time, Sudden Death, Warpaint, Carnage, Dragon's Roar and Siegebreaker. Like I've said on previous videos, I'm taking Endless Rage because it's just the strongest, most competitive talent in that tier. There's no ads to spawn Warpaint, and really there's not too much else to say about it. Your next row really isn't really going to matter much. There's nothing to stun, so you can't take Stormbolt. Double Time, you just don't need the charges. I took Double Time anyway. Like I say, it's a kind of an irrelevant pick on that row. Next row I'm taking Sudden Death, as you can get some nice cleaves from the Sudden Death procs onto the ad, or if you've got the ad targeted, vice versa, onto the boss. Taking Warpaint next because there's really no need. You're going to need Leap more frequently than its base cooldown. And this is a fight which is predominantly quite heavy healing and heavy raid damage, so Warpaint just to help the healers out there. Again, as previously, on other bosses, Carnage is going to be taken in the next tier because it's the most competitive, strongest talent on that line, etc. It's just your go-to talent there. I'll be taking Dragon's Roar next as opposed to Bladestorm. The reason for Dragon's Roar is that it's on a 35-second cooldown and the ad spawns every 30 seconds if I remember correctly, so although Dragon's Roar timing is slightly out, it's going to be up much more frequently for the ads as opposed to Bladestorm. And on the last tier, I'll be taking Siegebreaker. For me, it's simming high, single target, and you get the added benefit of being able to cleave the debuff onto the ad or onto the boss, whichever one you've got targeted, helping get that cleave damage up. And it's on a 30-second cooldown, so it should be up for every ad. So this fight is going to largely be down to killing the ad that spawns before it gets its second cast off and managing the debuffs correctly. So my marker is going to be orange, so I'm largely going to be floating around that area. It'll be Bloodlust on pull, so I'm going to be going with all cooldowns just to make the most of that Bloodlust. And then just basically waiting for the first ad to spawn, making sure I'm around my mark. So the first ad is on Juggernaut, so I'm going to get close to it and just start cleaving my all your abilities basically. So you're getting your Whirlwind as your third ability every time to refresh your Whirlwind buff, and also getting a Dragon's Roar off as soon as possible. And also I cleaved the Siegebreaker debuff onto there. I'm largely going to be avoiding picking up the debuff from the orange group, the Omega Vector, to begin with, because we kind of want the range to get the most stacks, not the melee, and that will become apparent later on. So again, cleaving through the boss onto the ad, and as this is I think the third ad, we kind of suffer DPS on this one a little bit because Bloodlust is gone, etc. So I have to target that one directly, trying to cleave rampages and executes as it dies. As you know, you want to cleave as many executes as possible, really, because that's where you're going to get your big damage. So I went to the orange marker there to pick up the debuff, as I've got no stacks so far. Before going away, you can move away from your group, go onto the ad, get some uptime, and then as long as I'm back onto my group by the time the debuff expires, it will go onto my group again, and I can move out, and I'm safe to just carry on killing the ad. So killing the ad again there, making sure I try and cleave some execute damage and rampage, as well as all the other abilities. Just chilling in the middle. Not worrying about the debuffs too much, and killing that Gestate as soon as my camera sorts itself out. Get as much damage on this as possible, and whilst everyone's grouped up, I'll be rallying before we all spread out just for some more HP in this kind of this split phase. And I'm basically just going to be looking for orbs to soak in this quadrant of the room. So our group is the orange mark, which is in the kind of the northwest corner. So I'm largely going to be up this end trying to soak the debuffs, and I'm going to stand next to Damon there to collect the debuff, keep dodging these. Because basically you want to keep handling the Omega Vector, bouncing it between your team before you go back to the first phase. And I'm going to stand on the marker to drop it off to one of my team, and then back to the boss. And now I'm going to save Recklessness and Siegebreaker for when the ad spawns, because as I said earlier, the ad really is priority. So it spawns, I'm going to Recklessness, cleave some Siegebreaker damage, and then cleave through the boss. As some people's cooldowns are often back by this time, so I don't need to target it directly. Going to cleave that execute and rampage and just get some good damage, and then I'll target it to get another cleaved execute and rampage, and we're all good. So this weaker on the left here where it says Cutter's Oven, Monk, Punch and Coburn, that's basically to track the debuff. So I'll be keeping an eye on that to see when I need to start picking it up. Basically when the range starts to get to like 6-7 stacks, we'll start bouncing it between the melee and trying to keep the melee stacks below 6 so that we don't have to spread as early on in the fight as the ranged would. because you kind of lose quite a lot of uptime having to like spread all the melee. So again, just DPS in the boss, staying behind, going straight onto that ad. It's key you get onto the ad as soon as possible, especially if your ad damage is low. You want to be targeting the ad and then cleaving through it, making sure it dies before the second cast goes off. And Siegebreaker is just coming back up, so again, cleaving Siegebreaker, always cleaving the Siegebreaker, and that execute, and then the Rampage. That's lovely. So I've only got 3 debuffs at the moment. Our Hunter has now got 6, and our melee Zoven, who's also only got 1 debuff, has just picked it up. So now I'm going to be looking at probably collecting it off of Zoven, as I've only got 3 stacks, and it makes sense for me or Cutter, the other rogue, to get it. Just killing this before we spread for the transition, and saving my leap in case there's any emergency situation. So I see there's one right in the distance, so I leap to that and get that one. Once you're in it, stay in it. And then I'm going to hang around this end, see if any more spawn. No more have spawned, so I'm going to kind of make my way back for a bit of healing. Now I'm going to go next to Zoven and collect it off of him, as I've only got 3 stacks. There you go, it's on me now. Now I can move to boss and start DPSing. Again, saving Recklessness and Siegebreaker here for when the ad spawns. You'll kind of want to be lining your cooldowns up for the ads on our mage con there. Hard luck on the rune, mate. Never mind. So CD's into the ad there, cleaving onto the boss, and now cleaving through the boss. As the first ad which spawns after each phase, you typically, like, the raid DPS seems to be quite high on it, so you don't need to, like, you know, absolutely tunnel it. You can cleave through it. Cleave through the boss onto the ad, but it's largely going to depend on your raid comp and kind of how you do it. So killing this ad, again, I'm going through the ad as opposed to through the boss now, as this is the second ad in this transition phase, and sorry, not transition phase, in this phase, and sometimes we struggle to kill it. So making sure I get the cleaved Rampage onto it. So I'm going to collect the Omega Vector next. I'm going to get onto the guy who's dropping it, and now I've got it. Whilst you have it, whilst the debuff's ticking down, you're free to move around anywhere you want, as long as you get back to your marker or wherever you want to drop it off to before the timer expires. You could, you know, go to Africa and back, it doesn't matter. Again, making sure I'm on the mark, passing it back to Zoven, and then killing the ad. Cleaving that Siegebreaker and execute. I decided to do a non-enraged execute there because if I'd rampaged, the ad would have died, and I preferred to get the execute because if it had died, I wouldn't have been able to execute. Does that kind of make sense? I can always execute, rampage after the execute, but I can't execute after the rampage if the ad is dead. Making sure this ad is dead and rallying cries back off cooldown, so I'm just going to pop it again. It's a shame I've picked up a stack from there, but it can be got hard to avoid sometimes, and really the ad dying before the second cast takes priority here. So I'm going to stand in the middle here just in case these need covering, but someone leaps to the back one, so I just step out of both of them, and we both take damage from only 1 each instead of taking unnecessary damage. So I've got 6 stacks of the blood debuff now. I can't actually remember what it's called, but you see it next to on my screen on the left. So that means that when, not guest state, but there's another ability which is cast, which I will, Contagion. So when Contagion is cast, I'm going to need to spread out because I'll be doing splash AoE damage, and so will everybody else who's got 6 debuffs. It can be really sucky because the boss's hitbox is quite small, so if you're not positioned correctly, then you'll either kill people or lose damage, but it's better to lose damage and kill people. So cleaving through the boss here, as he's now sub 20%, so cleaving the executes. And this is where I've got not very good spacing on the boss and lose a bit of uptime, grab the Omega Vector. At this point, we're just going to nuke the boss and ignore the ad. I don't think I've made very good use of my cooldowns here. I've done a lot of kind of like tab target swapping when it was a little bit unnecessary. So again, I'll switch to the ad when we're meant to be just nuking the boss, and it's a bit of confusion on my part there, trying to get space and going out of range and just generally not having a good position there. And that lost uptime, I think, hurt at the end there, especially during Recklessness. But nonetheless, it has died, and that was actually quite a clean kill. And we didn't finish too bad overall compared to the rest of the raid. In terms of my damage, we can definitely do more. On the first kill, it's obviously going to be best to make sure the ad dies, which means saving Recklessness, saving Siegebreaker, etc. for the ad. In the future, I've got a feeling that that ad's going to die so fast that it might not necessarily be worth holding on to Recklessness and Siegebreaker for a prolonged amount of time. For example, coming out of the soaking phase, I will probably just use Recklessness on cooldown, same as Siegebreaker, but we'll see how that goes in following weeks. apart from just trying to do more damage, hopefully you found some useful tips there. Basically, you want to be cleaving all your abilities, targeting the boss if you know the ad's going to die, and targeting the ad if you know the ad is one which might get a second cast off. Saving leap to get into the pools which are stretched far out, and once you're in one, stay in one. Bouncing the debuff smartly, and finding space when you've got 6 stacks or more. And that's really it. Alrighty guys, cheers, see ya.